Hey guys, welcome to Creepypasta Storytime. I'm Gilloboijr Jr. and this is going to be the Among Us Creepypasta. There is one imposter among us. Enjoy. I recently started playing this mobile game called Among Us that's been circulating around social media these days. For a tour on what it's all about, the game allows up to 10 players to join in a room, 9 players crewmates, and there is at least one random imposter, chosen by the game itself at random for every round. The objective is for the crewmates to accomplish tasks and escape the spaceship, while the imposter gets to kill and sabotage these tasks until he is caught and eventually ejected. Now, the game itself already has a creepy sort of atmosphere, especially with the background music on the main menu, but it gets creepier with my experience playing it. Know that you join rooms with random people of various nationalities and walks of life, and every time you play is a new experience. I was having a great time with a bunch of people. We've played around 5 rounds together, and trust me, it does get addicting when you play it with the right people. One of the guys decided that it was enough playtime for the day, and he had to go, so naturally, another random player joins to fill him in, and his in-game name was simply X. He was pretty psyched, immediately wanting to start, while I and the other guys were still chatting. You can't chat when the game starts, you can only chat when it's time to vote. This was normal. I mean, I was like this when I first got involved in the game too. The chances of being an imposter with 10 players is slim, so obviously I didn't get a chance to be one on this round. We played as usual, finishing up tasks and trying to do so in pairs as some sort of strategy we came up with. An emergency meeting, which you can do in game in case you suspect someone to be the imposter, was called. As mean as the following narrative sounds, the guys started ganging up on X, merely in jest, suggesting that he might be the imposter. X would deny this, of course. With this game, one has to be tricky, so we can never know if he's telling the truth unless he gets ejected from this round, and we find out whether we eliminated the right or wrong player. Majority were already set on eliminating X, most likely without proof. Before X got ejected from the round, he sent on the chat, "If I do become the imposter, I swear I'll kill all of you and win this thing, starting with you, player, who accused me without any proof." It turns out that he wasn't our guy, so we continued the round as usual until it was over. Back in the lobby, X had started reprimanding and trash-talking all of us for our actions, in which we replied to him in jest. This was a game, after all. Hey, no need to get so worked up over a video game. 7th round now. Look at that. Still not the imposter on my part. Oh well. I guess we'll just have to keep on playing until everyone gets a chance to be one, right? This round was rather intense, as dead bodies. Yes, the term in game for when an imposter kills a crewmate is to report a dead body found by fellow crewmates. We're now involved instead of just someone stupidly calling for emergency meetings just to vote someone out randomly without any proof. What makes it more exciting is that this killer was elusive. I was wondering why everyone was being nice to X and not suspecting him this round. Was it because he might explode into some kind of toxic tantrum again? For some reason, everyone now just started ignoring X because of his behaviour shown last round. I felt bad for ganging up on him. What if the guy was a new player? Even if he isn't, he was playing foul just because he was a new guy in Among Us. In the end, it turns out that X was the imposter. I disconnected from the game because I felt pretty tired now, and besides, I had other things to do. It was fun. That X player, if he just started out with the game, he did mighty well in evading any suspicion until he had killed off all the others except for me, which merited the imposter a victory, if only one crewmate is left standing. The next morning I was browsing on my Facebook account when I saw a trend on, quote, 8 people found dead in one night, causes unknown, end quote. At first I ignored it, just another mass murder kind of news, but then it merited a lot of shares and sympathies because it was pronounced the death of these 8 individuals last night happened in different areas, but the time of death was connected. It was about the same time I had quit or disconnected from the Among Us game. Coincidences happen, right? What does the death of 8 people have to do with some dark online game that's just recently gone famous? I read one article in full and learned eerily that these individuals have another thing in common, that they all had X marked on their foreheads. At the time I'd finished reading the article, my phone tinged with a message notification. I opened it and it read, "I told you, I'd kill you all and I'd win this thing." That was just a short creepypasta, guys, from the Among Us game. That was... I don't know, I'm not going to put an opinion on it. It was just a good, quick little read. Hope you have a good day, guys. I'm Gilloboijr Jr. Bye bye. What's going on, guys? I'm Gilloboijr Jr. and welcome to a quick reading of Animal Crossing Dead Town, which is creepypasta from the Ordinary Gamers wiki. Keep it spooky, hope you enjoy the reading. So I once thought nothing scary could ever happen to me, but when I got my hands on an Animal Crossing game, everything had changed. You would think that's just Animal freaking Crossing, and it couldn't have been that scary, but I'm going to tell you my story. No ghosts were involved as far as I can tell, but I could be wrong. It all started harmless enough. That's often the case, right? I was bored one day and decided to open my 3DS to check out what games were available. As I browsed through the eShop, New Leaf was on the list of popular games. I heard from a friend that Animal Crossing was a great game, so I ultimately decided to buy it. I'm a fan of having a hard copy of games, so I can add it to my literal library of games. So I went out and tried to find a copy of the game. I started at Freddy Myers, as that is an easy place to find some new games, but they were all sold out. I tried Walmart, but they didn't have one either. Was I going to resort to garage sales? No. Too easy to get hacked or a broken game. I went to my last hope, GameStop. I thought of coming here first, but decided against it. As I entered the store, everything was oddly silent. It was completely void of people besides the cashier. When he saw me, he was overjoyed, literally shouting, "Finally, a customer!" before asking what I wanted. We started up a small conversation about games to come out soon. Pikmin 3 to be specific. He said to me that he didn't like the looks of it, but I kept my trusty outlook. It's Pikmin, not much can ruin it. He brought up Pikmin 2, but I told him the only thing it truly lacked at the time was a time limit. After a long discussion, I told him I was looking for Animal Crossing New Leaf, and he seemed to question my judgment. I gave him my reasons, and he went with it. He pointed over to the 3DS games, and I searched for a few minutes, keeping some discussions going with the guy so the silence wouldn't get to either of us. After sifting through the games about 3 times, I told him there wasn't a copy on the shelves. He seemed confused and walked over to check himself. After finding no copies, he told me he would look around behind the counter. He found a single copy, new and untouched. He still seemed confused and told me why. They had gotten new stock in recently enough, and no customers had come in today, so there should have been several copies available. I simply told him that he might have lost count, or maybe the shipment was wrong. He said that was very unlikely, but it does happen sometimes. He got the game, and also gave me an old Jak and Daxter game for the inconvenience. It wasn't that considerate, considering they were having a sale on all PS2 games, each were only $5, but I wasn't about to refuse a game I had recently lost my own copy of. As I got home, I was eager to get started. There was nothing more I wanted than to sit down and play, so I plugged in my 3DS charger, put the game in, and began playing. It was completely normal, I think. I was on a train, a cat person walked up to me, asked my name and where I was going, and let me select the map I wanted to play on. As the train stopped at the town, my character was greeted as the mayor by mistake. I got a massive debt to a raccoon, and I continued the rest of my tutorial. I had paid back the loan on the first day, and my house was scheduled to be completed by the next day. I hated waiting events, so I saved and quit, switched the game state to the next day, and continued playing. My house was complete, and I got a list full of tasks. I finished them and everything was once again going to continue the next day. At this point, it was a bit late, so I went to sleep. When I got up, I got my 3DS ready and began playing the game again. I did several small tasks and had the day's events completed quickly. At this point I was able to create buildings, and began to work on a fountain. Just before I quit for the day, I noticed that there was another house being built. A new resident was going to move into my town. At this point, I was growing quite fond of my residents, so I honestly couldn't wait until this new guy had moved in. I checked the sign at the front of his plot of land and found that his name was Reaper. Well, I've seen weirder names. The only other interesting event that day was that I got stung by a bee. When I got back to the game the next day, I was surprised to see that Reaper's house wasn't done yet. The only thing there was a door. The weirdest part was that I had the option to go through it. I decided against it. What good would it do to enter a door to nowhere? I continued collecting my money and preparing for the next loan and project. I was soon done on board, so I saved and quit. It was later that night when I got back to the game. The first odd thing I noticed was that everybody looked a bit sad about something and were gathered around the town centre. They all said the same thing. What happened to him? And I couldn't figure out why. I looked around for my favourite character, Deli, only to find that he was nowhere to be seen. I figured he would be at his house, so I went over, only to find his house in ruin. The roof was collapsed and the door was on the ground in several pieces. The strange thing here was the door looked like it had been slashed apart by some sort of sword or other weapon. I walked around, sad and angry about Deli's house and disappearance. As I passed Reaper's house, I saw that another piece of his house was completed. I couldn't find out what happened to Deli, but I felt he had something to do with it. I did the usual stuff and saved and quit. I had gotten on early the next day to find a new resident that didn't seem to have a house. It was a bit creepy to look at him, as he wore black and frequented Deli's destroyed house. He was also a monkey, like Deli, but his fur was black and his face was red, an odd colour choice for such a normally cheery game. When I tried to talk to him, all he said was Lucy, another resident's name. Lucy was a pig and had a very cheerful attitude. I became worried and ran over to her house, but found out she was fine. I continued my normal routine and found that no progress had been made on Reaper's house. As I saved and quit, I swore I saw the door of Reaper's house open. I started the game again, the next day obviously, and found out shortly that Lucy had disappeared. I quickly ran over to her house to find that her house had completely collapsed. The door was slashed apart. A new character was near her house. This character was just as creepy as the last one at Deli's house, but was completely white and semi-transparent. This character was also a pig, like Lucy. I began connecting the dots, but I wasn't completely sure. As I passed Reaper's house, I noticed more of it had been completed. I knew something was unnatural about this character. I walked around,
did the normal things, spoke with the ghost character, who said another character's name, and walked back to Reaper's house. The door was still closed. I watched carefully as I opened the pause menu. Nothing yet. I moved the cursor to save and quit. Still nothing. I pressed the button, and the moment the screen began fading to black, the door had opened and something poked its head out for a split second before the screen went to black. I immediately loaded up the game again and went to find the character the ghost spoke about. As I reached the house, I noticed, in the corner of my screen, a robed figure. The moment it saw me, it bolted. I followed it and ran to Reaper's house, into the door, and the door slammed shut. I figured I'd saved the day, so I quit and felt at ease. This time, everybody seemed scared by something. I went to each character's house and all of them were fine besides the victims. Reaper's house had absolutely no changes, but I felt as if I was in danger there. When I went to the town centre, I found the tree had burned down. The charred black bark of the tree seemed to be some sort of death threat. I wasn't really scared, just angry. I was angry that whatever it was thought it could threaten me. I walked to the town hall and continued the normal routine, and to my surprise, Isabel was perfectly normal. Maybe the town hall was a safe haven from all these weird things. I went about my business as usual, and quit the game. I got on again to find that my house was destroyed and my character was now the same as the other ghostly characters. My character wouldn't move, so I quit and restarted as a new character. Even as I did, weird things were happening. The cat asked where I was going, but the moment I told him, he asked why I would want to go to that cursed place. He suggested that I change my mind, to which I said no. As my character got off the train, he was greeted by a robed figure who said nothing. He walked away, and I walked around, noting the destroyed houses. When I saw Isabel walking around, I knew something was wrong. Isabel doesn't leave the town hall. Even if I think she should. Isabel was my favourite character because of her attitude towards her work and helping the mayor. She seemed absolutely heartbroken when I saw her. When I spoke to her, she would only ask why the mayor had to die. I ran over to Reaper's house and found that it wasn't only closest to completion, it was actually complete. I walked inside and saw the corpses of each character that had died. Deli was impaled and hung up on the wall. Lucy's limbs were cut off and she was laying on the ground. And the mayor, well, he was all over the place. Literally. His limbs were hung up on the wall, hanging from the ceiling. His eyes were on a nearby table. And his head was in the corner. I was horrified. The robed person walked into the room. He only said one thing to me. "Do you like my decorations?" I caught them all myself. I wanted to get out of there, but Reaper was in the way. Each time I would try to leave, he would reply with, "Leaving so soon? The party's only just begun." Out of desperation, I went into my inventory and found it filled with only one type of item. It was some sort of Japanese spiritual seal. I quickly used it. My character threw it onto the robed person, who immediately disappeared with a scream. I walked outside and immediately threw the seals all over my house. Once I did, I didn't feel like I was in danger anymore. But my heart was pounding. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I relayed the story to my neighbours. Whenever I mentioned Reaper, they got all fidgety. The old man in the neighbourhood brought me over to an old house covered in paper slips. He told me they got a neighbour who liked to be called Reaper. After his arrival, 3 people in town went missing. Their houses destroyed, one of which was the mayor. After that, the police found him and arrested him, but he disappeared afterwards, and people became nervous. They immediately put seals on that house. Each person put a new seal on it for each time they had any encounter that reminded them of him. The old man then handed me a seal. Thanks for listening, guys. I'm Gilloboijr Jr. Hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please like and subscribe. There'll be a playlist on the screen as always right now for Creepypasta Storytime. Check them out, they're really good. Bye bye now.
Hey there guys, welcome to Creepypasta Storytime. I'm Gilloboijr Jr. and welcome to a reading of Happiness for Sale, which is from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Hope you enjoy. A man came into town today. A very strange man. He looked to be in his 30s, walking with a hunched back with a load of items upon it. He had thinning red hair and tannish skin, as well as an almost skeleton-like frame. He was quite small, really. It was the big grin on his face that got to me. It was such a large smile, almost inhumanly big. Its edges seemed to stretch beyond his cheekbones and into his ears. He strolled into town with that joyful expression on his face, speaking in almost whispers to children who were lined across the street. The children would stare at him, emotionless as he whispered to them. I couldn't make out what he was saying from the distance, so I sat on the centrepiece in the town square, waiting for him to cross my path. I was genuinely terrified, to be honest, but I didn't know why. Yet, even still, I wanted to wait for him. I couldn't explain this curiosity, but it had a hold of me that would not be released until I spoke to the eerie man. He slowly began to approach me. The soft thudding of his footsteps was barely audible over the dull roar of the square. Yet all the same, I could hear it plainly as anything else whilst I waited in slight panic for him to reach me. He stopped in front of me, still not facing me yet. I looked up just to catch his face. He stared forward, then slowly turned towards me. He never opened his eyes, and the smile never disappeared from his face. Turning his head to me, he opened one eye and stared directly at me. I slumped down, an incredible fear that I had never felt hit me like a wave. He didn't say a word. He only stared into my eyes with a hawk eye that he had opened. I completely lost track of reality. The sounds of the square around me began to fade away, and I became immersed in an eerie silence that seemed almost deafening. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. Nothing would move. My body had seemed to be frozen in the bricks I was standing on. The smile felt like it was looking at me, almost like there was no true man behind it. Not the eyes. I can't explain it. But to put it best as I can, the smile seemed ageless, eternal. It echoed in my mind for infinity. My body began leaning away from him. Slowly his head turned back to face the road and he began to go on his way again. I was shaking violently. I felt like I could throw up. As he walked off, I realised that there were masks on his back. He must have been a mask collector of sorts. That night I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was the meeting with him in the square. He didn't say anything, but I felt as if he had completely disemboweled me with his glance. His piercing eye. I didn't know what it was, but that man wasn't human. No, he was something else. Something very sinister. That ageless feeling wouldn't go away either, as if he was some sort of ancient demon, wandering the air from city to city, town to town. Why though? I wanted to know more. I was becoming obsessed with the very thing that terrified me more than anything else. Tomorrow, I would search for him and see if he was in town. I had honestly hoped he had left, yet if he hadn't, I could begin to learn more about him. The next day I ate my breakfast and ran to the square. I saw a small group of people gathered around a small vacant building in the corner. I ran over to see him, the demon, standing in front of everyone. He had his hands together and was speaking about how he was opening his happy mask shop here in the square. He preached and preached, "Come one, come all," to the crowd. They all seemed mesmerised by his words. Finally, he finished and headed inside the tiny building. A small sign read, "Happy Mask Shop. Happiness is just a mask away." I shuddered. What was so scary about this man? I had to know more, so I ran inside. There was already a few people in there, yet it was silent. No one was talking. What was going on? Were they being negotiated something? I saw a man, a child next to him, and a woman behind him, yet none of them was saying anything. They were just staring at the happy masked man. He nodded his head, as if they'd reached some silent agreement, and he handed 2 masks to the man and the child. They turned and walked out. As they passed, I saw a glazed look in their eyes, as if they were completely out of it. The woman was out just behind them, carrying another mask. Then it was me. I was all alone with him. He cocked his head, maintaining his silence. He wanted me to speak, so I did, asking him about his shop, as well as where he came from. Silence. He didn't say anything to me. He just kept grinning. I was beginning to become irritated, yet simultaneously more frightened too. I stepped back towards the door, asking him just to answer me. Just then a child walked in. It was a boy, not over 5 years old. He walked up to the happy mask man. The man stood there and hunched over to the boy. The boy held out his hands, expecting a mask perhaps? The happy mask man opened his eyes. Both of them stared the most evil glare I'd ever seen at the child. I stepped back again, almost tripping as I reached for the doorknob. To my sheer terror, the man grabbed the boy by the neck and picked him up off the ground. I could hear horrific screeches of terror coming from the boy's throat. He was at least 8 feet off the ground. Just then, the salesman's mouth began opening, still smiling of course. It grew wider and wider until it was at least a foot wide. I could hear his jaws snapping as it opened. Horrible and inhuman sounds began coming from him as he raised the child higher. Then, all of a sudden, the child was halfway down the salesman's throat. I screamed as I could see the boy's legs kicking in the salesman's mouth. Slowly but surely they slid down and disappeared. The boy was gone. I began crying hysterically, yet I couldn't move. He turned to me, his mouth still hanging wide open. He then put his hands to his face. A strange glow began to appear around his hands. Slowly, he peeled his hands away from his face. A repulsive stretching sound could be heard as skin appeared to be getting pulled off. He arched his back farther and farther until his hands were separated from his face by a clump of flesh, at least 2 feet long. This man, no, this thing was a monster. The flesh tore off, leaving the same grinning face. He stood there with a mass of skin in his hands. Slowly the skin began moulding and contorting. I backed into the corner. What the hell was going on? Before I knew it, the skin had turned into a small shape in his hands. He held his hand out, showing me his new prize. It was the child's face. He'd made a mask out of flesh. The horror began to hit me, and I began vomiting into my lap. I heard a small chuckle coming from the salesman. No, I had to get out of here. I got up and ran for the door. Upon grabbing the doorknob, I heard one more thing. "Do you want a mask, my boy?" Tears were streaming down my cheeks as I was sobbing and running across the town square. I could hear people gasping and shrieking as I ran by. I'm sure that I was a poor sight, a child covered in blood and vomit. I didn't care though. That thing there was a demon. I ran to my house and straight into my room. Both of my parents were out. I sat there for what must have been hours, rocking back and forth, and covered in filth. Finally I got up and looked out the window. The small building was still there, but no one has gone into it. The sign was gone. To this day, I have no idea what happened, or what I experienced. I've never told anyone because I know no one would believe me. I washed myself and tried to continue my life as normal after that day. The happy masked salesman was gone. I even asked around town and people all began to claim that they had no idea what I was talking about, or they weren't sure. Dead ends were everywhere. Had it been a dream? No, I wouldn't make something like this up. And I pity all those that may experience him in the future. That monster, that thing, may the gods protect all who come into his path. It's been a few years now. A lot has happened since then, but he has never come back, and I dread the day more than anything when he may. If he does, I'll be sure to stay clear. If you see a man in your hometown claiming to sell masks, a man who looks off and seems to be hiding something sinister, stay away from him. He isn't human. Whatever it is. It is the very essence of evil itself. Thanks for listening guys, I've been Gilloboijr Jr. I hope you enjoyed this. Stick around for more creepypasta stuff. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I'll catch you on the flip side. Goodbye now. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Gilloboijr Jr. and welcome to a creepypasta reading which will be The Hand, inspired by the Legend of Zelda video game series. This is a new thing I'm going to be playing around with. I really enjoy creepypastas, I really enjoy scary stuff, and I really enjoy old Nintendo games, like especially the Legends of Zelda. So if you do like what you see, please like and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into the reading. Scorcher today. Hi, a blazing 110. No sign of rain. I turned off my car radio. I lived in Texas. This was pretty normal. I was headed to GameStop to get a used copy of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. My childhood game. I remember playing it for hours on end. Even after I beat the main game, I had so much fun with it. Even after all the heart pieces and gold skulltulas, it was so much fun. It's been 30 long years and I think I'm ready to start again. I bought a copy and headed home. I went up to the attic and found the old dusty box labelled Childhood Memories, a Rock'em Sock'em Robot set, a worn down teddy bear named Muffin, a Game Boy Color with an untouched copy of Pokemon Blue that hasn't been played in forever. Ah, and there it was, my old N64, with scribbled, almost illegible font, Mark, in red Sharpie. I excitedly began playing, naming my character Link, as I always did. I began 4 non-stop hours of nostalgia, from watching Darunia patting me on the head, to easily defeating Morpha, but the next up was the Shadow Temple. I always hated the Shadow Temple. Not Bongo Bongo or the Redeads, but the mini-boss. Dead Hand. I never really understood it as a child. All Navi said was that it had infinite hands. I learned the Song of Storms and went back to the windmill as a child. I drained the well and I went back down. That's funny. I never remembered that. A single dead hand. The ones like you find in the battle room, sticking out the well. Then again, it's been 30 years since I last played this game, so it's not like I could remember it. I went ahead and let it grab me. It yanked me down the well and straight into the dead hand's battle room. Okay, I know I remembered going through a series of things to get there. I went ahead and waited for him to come up. He would never come up. That's right. I needed to let one of the hands grab me. I just remembered a flashback of me and my old friend Tyler. Dude! Yeah? I just found this crazy glitch on Ocarina of Time. If you're fighting Dead Hand and you let all 4 of his hands grab you at once, something awesome will happen. What? You're lying. Tyler always lied about things like that. He died in a car crash maybe like 3 years ago. I never got a chance to try it though. In my past Ocarina of Time, all my files were full and there was no way I was deleting any. I decided to give it a go. I went to the centre and let all the hands grab me at once. There he was. Same empty face. Same bloody and white body. Knowing my Zelda more than anyone in my past school, it was easy. Strike when he lowers his head to attack. I followed my knowledge and I won in less than a minute. Tyler was lying. Nothing happened when you let him grab you with all 4 hands at once. The treasure chest appeared. I remember this had the lens of truth, I think. Sure enough it did, but the description was different. Come back here 30 years in the past. I'll be waiting for you. What? What did it mean by 30 years in the past? I was child Link, so I couldn't go back anymore. I had a brainwave. 30 years was the last time that I played my old game. Maybe Dead Hand meant my old Ocarina of Time game. I lost it a long time ago. How could I go back? I had only one chance. Maybe it was in the box in the attic. I crept back up there, box still open. I dug through the rest of the box, a few toy soldiers, an RC car, and at the bottom of the box I found it. An old worn out Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, the sticker peeled off, and the same illegible mark in the same red Sharpie. I took my new Ocarina of Time out and replaced it with the old one. 2 files, both named Link, greeted me after 30 long years. I went on the first one. I was adult Link in the Temple of Time, with the Goron tunic and the long shot, ice arrows and hover boots equipped. I went into Castle Market and waited for the Redeads, but no Redeads appeared, only hands. Long, white, bloody hands sprouted everywhere in the ground. There must have been 50 of them, each waiting to grab me and pull me under. Everywhere was in ruin, not just Hyrule Castle Town. The shadow music played. I went off to the bottom of the well as instructed. Kakariko village was full of hands too. I couldn't find any NPCs. I looked all over that small village, but I found one, the cuckoo lady, a hand grasping her face. When I talked to her, she replied with a chilling message. Why? Why did you leave us with him? How could you leave us like this for 30 long years? I felt guilty, leaving Hyrule citizens like this for 30 years. I had to stop this. I had to find Dead Hand. Wait, you couldn't go under the well as an adult. The single hand was waiting for me sticking out the well. Knowing the only way of getting to the battle room, it dragged me under. 20 hands all positioned and scattered around the arena. I let one of them grab me. I've been waiting for you. There he was. Nothing had changed. Same empty face, same strange body. I had to beat him. I knew I did. With 20 hands it was hard, but I was a hardcore Zelda player. I chopped each one down and struck. All the hands disappeared. I did it. Dead Hand was dead. Wait. No. He came back up. He was persistent, stubborn, willing to do whatever it took to kill me. He lifted his strange body off the ground. I almost threw up. Thousands of hands rose up from the visible part of him like a giant spider. I immediately began running. Out of the door, up the ladder, out of the town. He followed me all the way. I ran for what must have felt like forever. It felt like another 30 years. Tyler was right. Why didn't I try this earlier? If only I could ask him about it. I knew it was pointless in running. I only had one choice. I stopped and let him catch up. He ripped me apart. I could see all of Link's organs being ripped up by the hands. Everything. It was over. All over. I couldn't take this anymore. 30 years. This monster had invaded my most precious memories. I shut off the game. It was too much. I locked the games in the box and boarded up the attic. Every night, I see him out the window. He presses his hands against the window. Sometimes I even see his face. Every night, I realise that he will haunt me for the rest of my life. I dare not step out of this house. I'll end up just like Link. I have one of my other friends get food for me. All I can do is cry at the foot of my attic. I don't have the energy, the compulsion to do anything else. The worst part is, my hands grow thinner, whiter, and hungrier with each tear. So that what you just heard was The Hands from the Legend of Zelda series, a creepypasta from creepypastawiki.com. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm Gilloboijr Jr. I hope you enjoyed the video. So long now. Let me just start off by saying I hope everyone who watches my channel has a very Merry Christmas. I hope you all get the presents you're wanting, and if you aren't spending Christmas with anyone, I hope you just have a good day, and I hope you enjoy your day very much. Today we're going to be reading Strange Christmas Game, which is a creepypasta based around Christmas. I think it's quite relevant. So have a Merry Christmas, guys. Let's get into the story. It was the middle of November when we arrived at Martindale, and we found the place anything but romantic or pleasant. The walks were wet and sodden, the trees were leafless, there were no flowers, save a few late pink roses blooming in the garden. It had been a wet season, and the place looked miserable. Claire would not ask Alice down to keep her company in the winter months, as she had intended. And for myself, the Cronsons were still absent in New Norfolk, where they meant to spend Christmas with old Miss Cronson, now recovered. Altogether, Martindale seemed dreary enough, and the ghost stories we had laughed at while sunshine flooded the room became less unreal. When we had nothing but blazing fires and wax candles to dispel the gloom, they became more real when the servant after servant left us to seek situations elsewhere, when noises grew frequent in the house, when we ourselves, Claire and I, with our own ears heard the tramp, tramp, the banging, and the chattering which had been described to us. My dear reader, you doubtless are free from superstitious fancies. You pooh-pooh the existence of ghosts, and, quote, only wish you could find a haunted house in which to spend the night, end quote. Which is all very brave and praiseworthy, but wait till you're left in a dreary, desolate old mansion, filled with the most uncountable sounds, without a servant, with no old caretaker and his wife, who, living at the extremest end of the building, heard nothing of the tramp-tramp, bang-bang going on at all hours of the night. At first I imagined the noises were produced by some evil-disposed persons, who wished, for purposes of their own, to keep the house uninhabited, but by degrees, Claire and I came to the conclusion that the visitation must be supernatural, and Martindale, by consequence, unattendable. Still, being practical people, unlike our predecessors, not having money to live where and how we liked, we decided to watch and see however we could trace any human influence in the matter. If not, it was agreed that we were to pull down the right wing of the house, and the principal staircase. For nights and nights we sat up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, Claire engaged in needlework, I reading with a revolver lying on the table beside me, but nothing. Neither sound nor appearance rewarded our vigil. This confirmed my first ideas that the sounds were not supernatural, but just to test the matter, I determined on Christmas Eve, the anniversary of Mr. Jeremy Lester's disappearance, to keep watch myself in the red bed chamber. Even to Claire I never mentioned my intentions. About 10. Tired of our previous vigils, we each retired to rest. Somewhat ostentatiously, perhaps, I noisily shut the door of my room, and when I opened it half an hour afterwards, Home Mouse could have pursued its way along the corridor with greater silence and caution than myself. Quiet in the dark, I sat in the red room for over an hour. I might as well have been in my grave. I couldn't see anything in the apartment. But at the end of that time, the moon had rose and cast strange lights across the floor and upon the wall of my haunted chamber. Hitherto I kept my watch opposite the window. Now I changed my place to a corner near the door, where I was shaded from observation by the heavy hangings off the bed and an antique wardrobe. Still I sat on, but still no sound broke the silence. I was weary with many nights watching, and tired of my solitary vigil. I dropped at last into a slumber from which I awakened by hearing the door softly open. "John?" said my sister, almost in a whisper. "John, are you here?" "Yes, Claire," I answered. "What are you doing up at this hour?" "Come downstairs," she replied. "They're in the oak parlour." I did not need any explanation as to whom she meant, but crept downstairs after her, warned by an unlifted hand of the necessity for silence and caution. By the open of the oak parlour, she paused, and we both looked in. There was the room we left in darkness overnight, with a bright wood fire blazing on the hearth, candles on the chimney-piece, the small table pulled out from its accustomed corner, and 2 men seated beside it, playing at cribbage. We could see the face of the younger player. It was that of a man about 25, of a man who had lived hard and wickedly, who had wasted his substance and his health, who had been while in the flesh, Jeremy Lester. It would be difficult for me to say how I knew this, how in a moment I identified the features of the player with those of the man who had been missing for 41 years. 41 years that very night. He was dressed in a costume of a bygone period. His hair was powdered, and round his wrists there were ruffles of lace. He looked at the one who, having come from some great party, had sat down, after his return home to play cards, with an intimate friend. On his little finger there sparkled a ring. In front of his shirt there gleamed a valuable diamond. There were diamond buckles in his shoes, and according to the fashion of his time, he wore knee breeches and silk stockings, which showed off advantageously the shape of his remarkably good leg and ankle. He sat opposite the door, but never once lifted his eyes to it. His attention seemed concentrated on the cards. For a time there was utter silence in the room, broken by only the momentous counting of the game. In the doorway we stood, holding our breath, terrified but fascinated by the scene which was being acted before us. The ashes dropped on the hearth slowly, and like snow we could hear the rustle of the cards as they were dealt out and fell upon the table. We listened to the count. 15-2, 15-4, and so forth, but there was no other word spoken. Still at the length the player, whose face we could not see, exclaimed, "I win! The game is mine!" Then his opponent took up the cards, sorted them over negligently in his hand, put them close together, and flung the whole pack in his guest's face, exclaiming, "Cheat! Liar! Take that!" There was a bustle and confusion, a flinging over the chairs, and such a noise of passionate voices mingling that we could not hear the sentence which was uttered. All at once, however, Jeremy Lester strode out of the room, in so great a hurry that he almost touched us where we stood. Out of the room, and tramp up the stairs to the red room, whence he descended into a few minutes with a couple of rapiers under his arm. When he re-entered the room, he gave, as it seemed to us, the other man his choice of weapons, and then flung open the window. and after he ceremoniously giving place to his opponent to pass out first, he walked forth into the night air, Claire and I following him. We went through the garden and down the narrow winding walk to a small piece of turf, sheltered from the north by the plantation of the young fir trees. It was a bright moonlight night by this time, and we could distinctly see Jeremy Lester measuring off the ground. "When you say free," he said to the man whose back was still towards us, "they have drawn lots of ground," and the lot had fallen against Mr. Lester. He stood thus with the moonbeams falling upon him, and the handsome fellow I would never desire to behold. "One," began the other. "Two," and before the kinsman had the slightest suspicion of his design, he was upon him, and his rapier through Jeremy Lester's breast. At the sight of that cowardly treachery, Claire screamed aloud. In a moment the combatants had disappeared. The moon was obscured behind a cloud, and we were standing in the shadow of the fair plantation, shivering with cold and terror. But we knew at last what had become of the late owner of Martindale, that he had fallen, not in a fair fight, but foully murdered by a false friend. When late on Christmas morning I awoke, it was to see a white world, to behold the ground and trees and shrubs all laden and covered with snow. There was snow everywhere, such snow as no person could remember have fallen for 41 years. "It was on such a Christmas as this that Mr. Jeremy disappeared," remarked the old sexton to my sister, who had insisted on dragging me through the snow to church. Whereupon Claire fainted away and was carried to the vestry, where I made a full confession to the vicar of all we had beheld the previous night. At first, that worthy individual rather inclined to treat the matter lightly, but when, a fortnight after, the snow melted away and the fair plantation came to be examined, he confessed there might be more things in heaven and earth than his limited philosophy had dreamed of. In a little dear space just within the plantation, Jeremy Lester's body was found. We knew by the ring and the diamond buckles and the sparkling breastpin, and Mr. Cronson, who in his capacity as magistrate came over to inspect these relics, was visibly perturbed by my narrative. "Pray, Mr. Lester, did you not in your dream see the face of the gentleman, your kinsman's opponent?" "No," I answered. He sat down and stood his back up to us all the time. "There is nothing more, of course, to be done in the matter," observed Mr. Cronson. "Nothing," I replied, and then the affair would doubtlessly have been terminated. But there were a few days afterwards, when we were dining at Cronson Park, Claire all of a sudden dropped a glass of water she was carrying to her lips and examined. "Look, John! There he is!" Rose from her seat, and with her face as white as the tablecloth pointed to a portrait hanging on the wall. "I saw him for an instant when he had turned his head towards the door as Jeremy Lester left it," she explained. "That's him!" Of what followed after the identification, I have only the vaguest recollection. Servants rushed hither and thither. Miss Cronson dropped off her chair into hysterics. The young ladies gathered round the mamma. Mr. Cronson, trembling like in an ague fit, attempted some kind of explanation while Claire kept praying to be taken away, only to be taken away. I took her away, not merely from Cronson Park, but from Martindale. Before we left the latter place, however, I had an interview with Mr. Cronson, who said the portrait Claire had identified was that of his wife's father, the last person who had saw Jeremy Lester alive. "He's an old man now," finished Mr. Cronson, "a man of over 80, who has confessed everything to me. He won't bring any further sorrow or disgrace upon by making this matter public." I promised him I would keep my silence, but the story gradually oozed out, and the Cronsons left the country. My sister never returned to Martindale either. She married and is now living in London, though I assure her there are no strange noises in my house. She will not visit Bedfordshire, where the, quote, little girl wanted me so long ago to think of her seriously, is now my wife, and the mother of my children. Right, that's the end of the story, guys. I hope you all have a great Merry Christmas. Thanks for listening if you did. I hope you have a brilliant time. I hope you get everything you wanted on Christmas. I've been Gilloboijr Jr. So long now. Hello and welcome to another Creepypasta Storytime with me, Gilloboijr Jr. And today's Creepypasta is going to be Halo 3 Remastered by Destroyer 334545. Sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the story. It used to bug me on how Halo 3 never got a remaster, but the sad truth is, it did get a remaster. It's something that I wish never existed, something horrifying that I had to witness. So, I got the Xbox One on Christmas 2014. I wanted it for Halo, and with the Master Chief Collection out, I was excited. Halo 3 had always been my favourite, so I was a little bummed that it would have the worst graphics in the Master Chief Collection. It finished downloading on December 28th, 2014, and I went to Halo 3 on the menu, and to my surprise, Halo 3 said, Halo 3 Remastered. I pressed it. The menu showed up of all the levels, including the removed Guardian Forest in between the Ark and the Covenant, which baffled me. Long story short, the remaster is one of the fucked up things I've ever seen, and I'll explain why. and how the levels were. I only played up to Floodgate. I didn't want to continue. It was the most disturbing, and dare I say it, scary things I'd ever played. Sierra 117 was the only level that remained pretty much the same as the normal, with the exception of Halo 2 Anniversary graphics. The Jackal snipers were way more accurate, but I was playing on normal, so it didn't really affect me much. Crow's Nest was a little odd, as the beginning cutscene had the injured Marines dead. The only ones that weren't dead were Miranda and Johnson. The dead Marines were pretty gross to look at, as they have battle wounds all over them. Playing the level starts with Cortana saying, "This place will become your tomb." And the level plays like normal, except that there were dead Marines scattered and no Cortana dialogue. The Savo Highway is where things get bad. It starts with one Marine alive and bodies scattered, some with limbs missing and bigger pools of blood, something I would never expect from a Halo game. I continued through the level, and then I got ran over by a chopper. Instead of Chief just going flying when you usually get ran over, you saw Chief get brutally sliced in half. It was very disturbing, something you really wouldn't expect in a Halo game. I respawned and got to the end. The shield you had to destroy at the end of the level had imprisoned civilians inside of it, and the Covenant pointing fuel rod cannons at you. A brute said, "Break the shield, or I shoot." To end this horrific level, the cutscene starts with Cortana saying, "You're a failure," and a pelican comes down to pick Chief up. After the pelican leaves, the brutes kill the civilians in brutal ways. The storm had the whole beginning part with the Warhog's cut, just straight to the building. When I walked into the building, I saw a Marine hanging himself off of a wire. I progressed through the building. There were no Covenant, but there were Marines sliced in half, several limbs on the floor, and the floor was painted in blood. There were organs, bone, tissue, severed limbs, and other human remains everywhere. It was very disturbing. I got to the point with the ghosts and the anti-air wraiths. The wraiths weren't shooting at the sky though, they were shooting at the Marines, with the Marines graphically exploding. They wouldn't shoot at me though. I went through the other building, and it was eerily familiar to the last one. There was a brute though, eating a human. He just ignored me. I then made it to the second part with the Scarab. This time there was no wraiths. The Scarab was already there, but I did nothing. I went through to the last building. Nothing was there except for a construction worker crying. I got to the last part. I saw chieftains running at me. Then it read at the bottom, "Worthless." I made it past the part due to a gravity hammer glitch. The cutscene shows Chief running from the brutes and the Flood ship comes in and graphically slices the brutes. Then Floodgate began. Dear God, Floodgate. It starts with the text at the bottom saying, "Nothing left," and you see the crashed Flood ship up close. The Flood came up, all human forms. The Marines started screaming inside the Flood forms. It was disturbing. I only got about 3 minutes through until I was killed. Instead of a normal death, it showed a clip. It shows a broken Chief armour. The Chief proceeds to take his helmet off. The face is melting off with cuts and wounds all over it, missing an eye. It was the most disturbing thing I'd ever seen. He says in a dying voice, "I failed God." Then the screen faded to black. So I quit the game because of how scared I was. And I looked at Halo Waypoint to see if anyone else had seen the Halo 3 remastered. No topics yet, but I did start a board and someone replied. I found it too. I managed to play the whole damn thing. I asked what happened after Floodgate. Before he could reply, the topic was pulled down by 343 Industries. So that was a short creepypasta, guys, based on the Halo series. I hope you liked it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. I've been Gilloboijr Jr. Bye bye. Hello and welcome to Creepypasta Storytime with me, Gilloboijr Jr. Today we're going to be reading Mario in all capital letters. I hope you enjoy. So, it all happened on tonight of all nights. I was bored, obviously contemplating on what I could do to waste time as I chatted with the people in #SMWC. We had good times and shared a few laughs together. Out of boredom, I decided to patrol the hacks waiting to be moderated section. Seems that we had quite a bit, 33 if I recall correctly. The first few hacks I saw when I sorted them by date were a couple of really horrible ones with bad screenshots to boot. Naturally I showed these hacks to the Centralites, currently on #SMWC. We were laughing at how bad some of them were, but then I got a hack called just Mario. Just that, nothing more, nothing less. The description seemed quite odd, as if some Japanese hacker was trying to translate the original plot of Super Mario World into English, and failing horribly. I showed this to Kieran and he started laughing at the description. It reads as follows. As you play the role Super Mario Plumber, verify that you are beautiful Princess Satoru. Game Bowser kidnapped the evil king. It is your job to save her. This hack includes 6 levels of very long. I simply dismiss this as someone trying to whack Japanese and release a crappy hack with some edits or so. That's what I thought it was at first. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to download the hack, not knowing what I was in for, since the single screenshot of the hack was the title screen and nothing else with the letters Mario from Super Mario World's title screen. I thought it was a little odd. how there were no dates or anything either, as hackers usually placed their names and dates on the titles to mark when the project was started. So when I opened the hack, I was greeted by two files, one called 3007014, a simple .txt file, 27 kilobytes in size, and the IPS file simply named Mario in all caps. For some odd reason, I wanted to see what the author of the hack had to say, but when I opened the hack in Notepad, there was nothing but indistinguishable symbols and letters and punctuation, sort of like how you open in a ROM in a text editor with Notepad. Seems like when the author just completely copied his ROM to .txt form, though I could be wrong. Taking a closer look, at the top of the .txt file, mixed in with the gibberish, I found the only thing that looked like English. Here is a piece of what I found. YOYA, JFIF, HH, YB, 1, find me, find me, find me, find me, find me, me.y. To be honest, I didn't know what to make of this. I thought to simply waste my time by making me find something in the text in this gibberish file. I guess it was that I was willing to bet. No one will ever be able to make sense of this. I decided that because my interest was growing steadily, I would start looking through my horribly disorganised download folder for a copy of a clean ROM, which I had downloaded a great deal of time before the events of tonight had unfolded. And an IPS patcher, of course my choice for the job was Luna IPS. So I then proceeded to move the ROM and the IPS patcher to the folder with the hack. I patched the ROM, not knowing what to expect next, and I quickly hurried to drag the ZSNES and play what I thought would be a terrible form of the ROM image. I noticed on boot up that the author had taken the time to change the header of his hack. Instead of the usual Super Mario World you would normally see when booting up a ROM in ZSNES, it just had the letters Mario there again. At this point I gained a little hope, because normally people who do horrible half-assed edits to the ROM generally don't know enough to change a header title. I thought I wasn't wasting my time with this, and my mood brightened slightly at the thought of seeing what the author had to offer in this interesting little hack. So the title screen loaded, exactly like it would in Super Mario World, except it just had Mario on the title, like I'd mentioned earlier. Something else had grabbed my interest more so than the usual absence of lighter free titles on the title screen. Mario's normal bright coloured happy palette seemed, how can I put it, dull. What was once violet like red now seemed like grey with a slight tint to it, and I'm fairly sure his pants were looking more grey than blue too. I thought this was strange, and I wondered why he had decided to give Mario such a dull palette. Regardless as to what his intentions were, I felt that something was wrong. Not in the sense that the palette was slightly bad, but that the hack was empty. Like something had happened upon pressing start and selecting a new file, like a lot of other countless Mario hacks I've played in the past. There was some sort of intro screen that basically described the entire plot in a short paragraph, just small enough to fit into a small black box. I began reading, and for the most part, the message stayed the same, but there was a key factor that made this interesting. Apparently, the main antagonist of the hack wasn't Bowser, it was Mario. The message read as follows. Welcome, this is Dinosaur Land. In this strange land we find the Princess Toadstool is missing again. Looks like Mario is at it again. What the? This wasn't the original message from Super Mario World, I thought to myself. Normally, I wouldn't think anything of this, seeing as how over my nearly 2 years at SMW Central, I have played countless hacks and have seen many different intro messages, but this one really stuck out. At this point I definitely knew there was something odd about this hack. Upon letting the intro music play, I pressed the start button on my controller to finally get the overworld and begin my journey. Upon entering the overworld, everything seemed normal. Same old level paths, same old music, but the level names were different. Instead of Yoshi's house, like it always has been, it was now simply just Yoshi's. The house part was gone. I thought that this was strange, and I began to lose hope in the hack because it seemed like barely anything had changed at all from the original. I was hoping to see something new. Well, unluckily for me, I got my wish. As you'll see when you read on, I decided to enter the level out of curiosity. When I entered, the whole house that's normally there was gone. No more smoke, no more fire, no more little birdies, no more treehouse. All that was left was the message box. I decided to hit it. Upon opening, the message I expected to be there was replaced with what seemed like binary. Apparently, it says Notepad. At this point, I was on IRC telling everyone about how the hack was starting to weird me out, which in itself yielded some sarcastic responses. But hey, I expected it. Anyways, after this my interest level in the hack skyrocketed, and along with my paranoia, oh boy was I in for a surprise. So I head to the left. Upon reaching what was before known as Yoshi's Island 1, the level now labelled Never Come Back. Now I thought things were going to be all Kaizo Death Trap, because generally that's what people name their levels in Kaizo hacks to make sure the player doesn't go there. To my surprise, it wasn't quite that way, though I wish that it had been. Upon entering level 105, I was greeted by the insanely loud clown car sound Bowser's flying vehicle makes right before Peach falls out. Of course, with my headphones being moderately high, the sound scared the living shit out of me, which wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been so nervous beforehand. I decided at this time it would be best if I turned the volume on my headphones down, as to not get any more unpleasant surprises such as that one. When I entered the level, other than the music, everything seemed to be the same except for the fact that the little Koopa on the sides of the ledges wasn't there anymore. Nor was the Bonsai Bill. The Dragon Coin was still there, however, for some odd reason I wasn't able to collect it, or rather, any Dragon Coins at all. The author had made certain of that. I also noticed that there was a brown used block near the spot where the Bonsai Bill normally shows up. I can only assume this was a revisit to the level after I had beaten it. Like, I heard in some half-assed creepy stories in other Mario games. Now I was wondering why things were like this, making me wonder about the intro message. Had Mario done something previously to Dinosaur Land? Was this Bowser's point of view? I quickly dismissed the latter option, because it seemed kind of stupid. So that left me thinking that Mario at one point in time, in the author's story, did something. But what? What did Mario do? My mind was nothing but rushing forth at this point. However, I quickly dismissed them and ventured further into the level, only to find that all the blocks had basically been hit. Coins had been collected, save Dragon Coins, those were still there and obtainable, that there were no enemies, and I could no longer go down pipes. What kind of bullshit am I playing here? I kept thinking to myself at this point. I felt uncomfortable. I decided to keep venturing. Eventually, I came across a message box, which I wasn't surprised was still in the level. Being the idiot I am, I went up and hit the box. Upon hitting it, I was greeted with a familiar black box once again. The message was edited, obviously, as I had figured at this point in the game. The message read as follows: Point of advice. I hate you. Now I thought things were starting to get the vibe that the author was a twisted and warped individual, and that I was right about Mario having done something. At this point, I was basically rushing to get to the end of the level, so I just scurried by. Then I came across another message box. However, this one was just a blank box with point of advice at the top, with nothing else in it. I quickly disregarded it and headed off further to the right, hoping to free myself of the hell that was once level 105. Upon reaching the end, I saw a fire flower in the top block, where the four-way block intersection used to be. However, it was too high for me to reach by normal means, so I just continued onward, like the blind, curious idiot I am would do. So I finally beat the level, and as the usual path to the Yellow Switch Palace was unlocked, I decided to head up the path that normally leads into the Yellow Switch Palace, and I found that when I entered the main overworld, every other landmass and decoration besides the ghosts from the ghost houses and Yoshi's Island itself were gone. Nothing really changed at the Yellow Switch Palace except for the Switch message. All that changed was the Switch Palace was changed to Mario World. Boring. Anyways, just when I thought I was done with this abomination that calls itself a hack, I found that Yoshi's Island 2 had also been edited. Oh joy, I thought to myself. Sarcasm. Upon reaching Yoshi's Island 2, I found that it had been renamed to Yoshi's House, the original name of level 104. I decided to enter and found that the palette of the level had been changed along with the background. They seemed to have changed the same palette as Yoshi's Island 3, you know, greenish tan and such, except the background was pushed down some and was now rotting brown, and that vegetation on the FG was no longer present. I decided to explore the level a bit and came across the trail of Koopas that countless players used to shell rack free one-ups with. I decided to ignore them and go and see if any more of the level had changed. I eventually came across the question mark that holds Yoshi and decided to free him. Upon freeing him, I got this message. Hooray! Thank you for rescuing me. My name is Yoshi. On my way to rescue my friends, Mario trapped me in that egg. This had me wondering what kind of sick and twisted hack I was playing. I had thoughts of all the possible scenarios of Mario attacking Dinosaur Land horribly and causing irreversible damage. The author had me hooked with this sick little game, and like any other idiot, I took the bait and kept coming back for more. Somewhere not far off from Yoshi's question mark block, I found a message box, in the same place I remembered that I'd always had been. Though, if I've learned anything from playing all of this, it's that whatever there had to be a message in a box, there was not going to be anything remotely normal in the slightest. That made me hesitant to hit it, but I ended up going and doing so anyway. I wanted to find out more. The message I was greeted with was as follows. But, is there anything I can do to change your mind? What the fuck, I thought to myself. What the hell did that even mean? Change my mind. What would I change my mind about anyways? Was this about Mario and whatever he did, and about how people were trying to convince him to stop? Or was Yoshi talking to me through these message boxes? Or was it about me playing the hack, asking me as if the hack was trying to talk to me through message boxes? Either way, whether it was, or more backstory on what Mario had done, or if it was questioning my decision to keep going. I decided to keep progressing despite the obvious signs that I should have quit playing the hack a while ago. As I progressed further, I found that I was right. All vegetation was gone, and nothing was left at all, save a few enemies, like chucks and moles and such. Even the pipes were gone. I came across another message box. Like all the other times before, I decided to hit it. I was greeted with another message. Point of advice. This is the selfish way out. The selfish way out? What the hell? Was he calling me selfish for continuing to play the hack despite the warnings? Had Mario made some kind of selfish decision that only benefited him? Was Yoshi still trying to talk to me? What the hell was this guy trying to tell me? At this point I was creeped out to the point that I was shaking slightly. A mix of anticipation, fear, and the fact that my room was terribly cold last night. I closed the message box and once again proceeded further. The area with the moles seemed the same, except for the fact that the block next to the vine block was gone, along with the happy clouds and dragon coin the vine allowed access to. This made me feel gloomy, to say the least. Not so much frightened as I was depressed. It's a feeling I couldn't really explain well. From this point on, it was basically just a big empty stretch of land to the end of the level. I proceeded quickly. I wanted to get the fuck out of there, as I felt that I'd spent enough time looking around. So me and Yoshi, I still had him at the time, opened up the next path to the overworld. It too was changed. What was once Yoshi's Island 3 now read as Yoshi's Island 7. Memories of Super Bobbido World flooded my mind. How the levels would take giant leaps in numbers, which made it seem ridiculous. Though at this time, I didn't quite find it as humorous due to common sense and obvious reasons explained earlier. I entered the level. As I entered, I was welcomed by a black, solid background and a blue-grey coloured floor. The place seemed frozen, lifeless and barren. There was nothing in the level at all, save the goal point. Just a clear stretch of land, with nothing else at all. I quickly lost interest and finished the level. This is what seemed like the most empty and creepy level in the game, though as you'll read on, it gets far worse. With the level beaten, a new path opened up. Yoshi's Island 4 was now just, leave now. Now I hesitated as to whether I should stop playing, but my interest kept me going further. At this point, #SMWC was nothing but me posting findings and messages from the hack, so others could experience what I was experiencing. The channel, sadly, was unusually active. It seemed like no one really cared, or wasn't around. I felt alone. I proceeded into the level. For the most part, everything seemed the same, save for the fact that there was no water at all to keep me from falling in the pit without using Yoshi as a sacrifice. The level was also void of all enemies. Whenever I got into an area that seemed too far for me to jump, I found that I could just walk right across on the air, thus getting rid of the need to use Yoshi as a sacrifice. It's apparent that the hack wanted me to keep him. I could tell that much. I was able to get the pipe that usually leads to the exit level. I went in and found the room was exactly the same, everything in the right place and nothing edited, or so I thought. The message box again broke the mood of that brief moment I realised I had gained upon entering the pipe. At this point, I was questioning whether I should keep going and see how it ends, or quit now while I still have a bit of common sense left. The message box was sort of indistinguishable, and I couldn't really make sense of it. For the moment, I tried to figure out what the box meant, but eventually, I just gave up and beat the level. I figured that the box wasn't worth the time anyway. With the level beaten, the path to the first world castle opened, now renamed from #1 Iggy's Castle to #1 Go Back. I sure did feel welcome there. I decided to completely ignore the level name, as I just wanted to get this over and done with, forever. What seemed like a normal castle intro was made especially creepy given the fact that I had to dismount Yoshi. I felt for the first time that I was actually abandoning him, and I wished that I had taken him with me. The inside room of the castle looked strange. There was a darkish bluish greenish black lava on the ceiling, and there was goal points that looked like pillars. Aside from that, next to each pillar, there was an increased amount of message boxes. Next to each pillar, the further I got. The room was basically just a big hallway with no enemies or anything of the sort. Every message box I now pressed either gave me a blank box with Yoshi's signature at the bottom, or a message that read as follows: "Don't you think you've caused enough trouble?" Another cryptic message. Though at this point I wasn't surprised, not in the slightest. Again, the thoughts in my head had started circling, wondering what exactly Mario had done, why he was here, and why everything seemed to hate everything about him and wanted him gone forever. I was feeling more depressed than scared at this point. To be honest, I had no idea what to expect next. I proceeded down the long hallway, checking message boxes filled with nothing but the same two messages over and over and over. It's like they were telling me to stop playing, or something. Obviously, I ignored them and kept going. I eventually reached the end of the hallway. There was a door, which I entered. I was welcomed with nothing but a small section of land, and at that, the level was auto-scrolling. So I figured at this point, this must be the end. That the author wanted me to jump into the pit and commit suicide or something, thus ending my journey. I was wrong. The auto-scroll pushed me over the ledge. and I was still walking. Unfortunately, the whole level was nothing but a long stretch of invisible land to another small piece of land, just big enough for a boss door to fit on it. The auto-scroll came to a stop, and I was prepared for the worst. I gathered my composure, swallowed some of my spit in my mouth, and took a deep breath. I entered. Nothing but a normal Iggy boss. I felt cheated in a way though. I was happy to think it was finally over. I defeated Iggy with 2 jumps effortlessly, which was actually the quickest I'd ever beaten him before. After he fell into the lava, the course clear message popped up as usual. It ended, and I was brought to the rescue egg scene. Though, instead of the usual message, I was shown something disturbing and vastly different, like a profile scene from a crime. It was as follows. Victim #1. Eyeballs were unable to be found. The victim was found lying on a carpet. Causes of death unknown. Hand marks with unidentifiable fingerprints were found all over the corpse. What the fuck is wrong with this guy? I said as I read the disturbing message. I mean, it was a hack, but still, who the hell was this victim? Why were the eyeballs gouged out? And who could have made those unidentifiable fingerprints that were found on her body? Was this Mario's doing? Is this what the author was trying to tell me? And furthermore, was the girl Princess Toadstool? It took me a while to see if I read the message correctly, then I proceeded outwards, though I was wondering what happened next, since the main map was completely gone and there was no trace of it anywhere. To my surprise, it still showed up a path marked for Donut Plains, the event tile still being there, marking the path to the lone level on the giant map that was once the main world. It was still called Donut Plains 1. I thought we were finally done once more, but when I entered the level I could see that like the previous times, I was once again wrong. Upon entering, I saw 2 message boxes. They said as follows: "There's no way out of here. Fly away." I found it quite strange that both these message boxes were contradicting each other. One was telling me that there was no way out of this accursed hell, and the other was telling me that I could just fly away. I could be free. Though I saw no feather or enemies to grab one with. Was this telling me that I could either rise up and go to heaven, or stay in hell forever, wallowing in despair? That I need a cave to proceed? And what happens after this? Is the whole game like this? I began to create more thoughts in my head, trying to figure the message boxes out, but to no avail. I proceeded to walk to the right. I made a jump, but I found that I was stuck in the area. There was an invisible wall. I had thought I'd hit a dead end. When I landed, I tried moving right again to see if there was any way to go on. All of a sudden, I heard the pipe sound, and I was making the pipe animation. Except, there was no pipe present, so it looked quite odd. I was then taken to a level with a black background, stone blocks for ground, and a small door. I was immediately given a mushroom to prevent me from entering it, so I proceeded further to see if there was anything else in the level. I found that the room was nothing but a long stretch of concrete blocks, and doors that were too small for me to enter because of the mushroom I'd been given. It's obvious that the author didn't want me to go through any of them, or I wouldn't have gotten the mushroom in the first place. So as I proceeded, I found myself at a dead end. There was nothing. I tried to go right again. It worked. I went through the brick wall. It acted like a pipe, and I did a pipe animation that it looked like I was going into the darkness. I was then taken to a small room with what seemed like a pit and a wall. I jumped down the pit, seeing as how there was no other option, though I found that the bottom of the pit was solid. I tried pressing down a bunch of areas until I came across a pipe. Mario slowly did the pipe transition downwards off the screen. Expecting another level, I waited, but there was no more, just a black screen. I was unable to continue, unable to pause, or exit the level, or move. There was nothing at all. This was the video game representation of death. A crash. Mario had died. After playing, I think I finally understand what was happening. I believe Mario was atoning for his actions, eventually being plummeted into a hell that looked exactly like Yoshi's Island, where he was lost to the grip of death forever. I was finally done playing and quite relieved that the nightmare was over. Activity on the IRC seemed to be back up again. I quickly shared my tale with the rest of #SMWC and typed as documentation of it. If you feel daring enough, you too can witness my tale firsthand. Remember guys, it's only a hack. It can't hurt you. Or can it? I've been Gilloboijr Jr. Thanks for listening to the story guys. This has been Mario. Catch you later.
Hey guys, I'm Gilloboijr Jr. and welcome to a Creepypasta Storytime reading. This is Ash's Coma from the Pokemon series. Hope you enjoy. If you do, like and subscribe. Let's get into the story. Have you ever noticed that the pacing and tone and story development of Pokemon changes after Ash is hit by lightning in the early episodes? How Ash and his world are relatively normal until after that incident? I have a theory. The accident with the bike put Ash into a coma. Days later, he was found and hurried to the hospital and treated with heavy medications. This is why Team Rocket became less menacing. The medication took effect and stabilised his coma dreams so that instead of being terrifying, they became idyllic. They allowed him to live out the Pokemon Master Fantasy. After the beginning episodes, the series is the result of Ash's subconscious mind fulfilling the desire as well as attempting to escape reality. Should Ash realise that he is in a coma, he would wake up and suffer brain damage, so that he must take down all his mental barriers one by one. If he can do that, he can come to grips with who he is and escape his coma. Further evidence comes from the realisation that even though his journeys take him to vast distances, he never usually travels by bike due to having developed a phobia of them. The coma in fantasy explains why he never changes much, physically. It explains the worldwide socialism, as he thought up a safe system of government that would run smoothly and keep the world going, allowing his adventures to work as they do. It also explains how a child can go on his own in a world full of dangerous and untamed animals. In addition, it explains why the town has the same police officer and every Pokemon Center has the same nurse. Joy and Jenny he knew from his hometown, and they act as a safety net or anchor, allowing him to feel safe no matter where he goes. They represent stability. The professors represent Ash's ideals, which is why Gary became a professor. The fantasy also explains why every time he enters a new region that virtually no one has heard of him, despite his conquests. How else could Paul, the rival of the Sinnoh area, not know someone who placed at least in the top 16 of all the 3 leagues and destroyed the Orange League and Battle Frontier? Moving on to the characters closer to him. Ash's travelling partners are aspects of himself which he can enjoy but not associate with himself. Brock represents Ash's repressed sexuality. Ash fell into his coma as a virgin, and as such, he needed an outlet for growing his sexual frustration. However, since he can never experience sex, Brock must never succeed. Brock's stay with Professor Ivy was an attempt by Ash's mind to suppress his sexuality. Brock isn't just a projection of Ash's sexuality, but is also a projection of Ash's fatherly instinct. He leaves his siblings to journey on with Ash because he can't cope with having so much responsibility. You may notice that James got more dialogue in this part of the series, as well as getting more touchy-feely with his Pokemon and exposing much of his backstory. Ash didn't enjoy this much, which is why Brock returns, horrified, and refused to speak about it. Ash's subconscious was repressing him at the time, so other than the general feeling of dread, he has no idea what happened. Further evidence of Brock being Ash's sexuality is that he keeps returning the series after Ash meets a new female aspect of himself. Misty is the first such aspect we encounter. Because she is the first and is merely an aspect of Ash, our explanation as to why Misty is such a prominent role in the show but is ultimately unobtainable, since he never really knew. Since Misty is his initial love interest, if only subconsciously, he needed her to reach a certain level of womanhood. He felt like he could only have a relationship once they've matured. In practice, however, he finds he can't cope with it, as he lacks real-world experience. He wants the normal, pushy, arrogant Misty he knew, thus not letting her keep Togepi. We can see this arc in the constant berating of his sexuality, but her eventually mellowing until she had faded into the background. Since Ash was quite attached to her, this was traumatizing for him. After this experience, anyone around him threatening to mature quickly ends up leaving only for another, more naive to fill and enter their place. Gary Oak is what Ash wants to be. He is wish fulfillment. He succeeded and then settled down into a normal life. Ash needs someone to succeed in his world, or he won't be able to validate it and will start questioning why he is and where he is. It's a subconscious trap to keep him from becoming too aware of his situation. His mind must have figured out that awareness of the coma would snap him out of it, so it took something the boy already loved and built a way out of it for him. However, Ash is too complacent to make a final stand and fight his way out, and he cannot escape. This is why he keeps encountering legendary Pokemon. They're his mind's way of showing him that he can do great things if he tries. It's a way to encourage him to try and push forwards. Team Rocket have the qualities of himself that Ash deems negative, but is coming to terms with. Jessie and James want to appease Giovanni, Ash's father figure. To achieve this, Jessie will trick the submissive James into doing her bidding for her. Meowth especially wants to appease him because he remembers the good times with Giovanni. This places Meowth in the category known as Ash's corrupted innocence. This is apparent because Meowth is able to speak. In fact, the whole reason Meowth can speak is so that Ash can eventually accept the aspects of Team Rocket as part of himself. The split caused his mother to move out of the city down to Pallet Town, and is one reason that Ash initially embarks on his journey, to escape the turmoil at home. The whole organisation, including Butch and Cassidy, is symbolic of his inability to escape his father's machinations. James's implied homosexuality, which does not necessarily make Ash a homosexual, and gullibility, while Jessie is vanity and manipulation. Since Meowth has the potential for rehabilitation and doesn't want to be evil, this once again fits with the conflicting personalities and demonised self-theory. Team Rocket cross-dresses because Ash is exploring his gender, a different facet than what Brock represents, his sexuality, and this was a method that allowed his gay/vain side to experiment freely. When he found that it wasn't something for him, he, free side, stopped playing with it. Max came with May. He played the ego and she played the ID with great aspirations in that session. They worked for a little while, but Ash being a teenager, his sexuality had to come back into play. He kept reinventing himself and eventually wrote new aspects, but his mind only slowly brought the old ones back as a crutch to make the transition easier. Dawn is Ash giving himself a chance to love. Since he already established Misty as someone he's not likely to go anywhere with, he created a new super female, one that was more like him and less violent. You may note that while both May and Misty have no tolerance for Brock's behaviour, Dawn seems to try and shrug it off. Tracy, the breeder, was a possible future for Ash that he discarded. This future was one that sent off to work with the Professor. Ash's ultimate ideal of a father figure, when Tracy disrupted the dynamic Ash had with his other possibilities. With Ash's mind fighting the coma, and Ash's viewing this person as a companion, Tracy was quickly replaced with a more threatening rival. Pikachu represents Ash's humanity. This explains the episodes where they got separated, and Ash desperately wants to find him, even to the point of working with Team Rocket, aspects of himself he would never usually associate with, but for some reason cannot. Team Rocket wants to steal Pikachu and hand him over to Giovanni. Jesse and James will always oppose Ash because he is terrified of the thought of his humanity lying in the hands of his father. However, this is the same reason he will work with those aspects of himself in order to save his humanity. Ash couldn't evolve Pikachu because that would mean challenging his concept of who he was, which was something he wasn't comfortable with while still working through the original issues. The narrator is Ash's higher mind, recapping and explaining the progress he's made and the tribulations he will face, allowing insight into how to best awaken himself. Team Rocket's method gradually become more and more ludicrous because Ash is only a child dreaming these things up. That is why Team Rocket's disguises are always believed. He knows it's them, at least on a subconscious level, but he chooses to ignore it so that he can better himself. In a sense, the Ash who wants to escape is sabotaging the Ash who wants to stay lost in his mind, so that there can be more conflict and hopefully an eventual escape. The escape is a conscious of coming to terms with who he is. As mentioned previously, Team Rocket are a method for Ash to deal with the grounds he's uncomfortable with tackling on his own. You may recall that early in the show, there were animals and references to animals, for example, the fish in the aquarium of Cerulean City Gym, or that the Pokedex lists Pikachu as rat-like. These animals don't matter to Ash's sake, so they don't come into play much. If Ash loved puppies, everything would be about different breeds of dogs and a dogfighting circuit, but as the series goes on, you see fewer realistic animals and more Pokemon. This could be a sign of Ash's mind deteriorating. As he's in the coma, he's losing concepts of some of the animals and machinery and replacing them with Pokemon. It could explain things like electric Pokemon working as power generators. These are signs that his memory of the old world is slipping more and more as time goes by. The Pokemon realm will be idolized continuously the longer he has no stimulus from the real world. Ash may or may not be mentally deteriorating, but he has come to terms with the more accustomed to his fake world and its rules. The wild Pokemon are his rationalizations for the functioning of a created fantasy. It's the "a wizard did it" syndrome. If he doesn't know how it works, his mind says it's Pokemon. The Pokemon in Ash's team, however, serve the purpose of displaying his issues and aspects of himself. For example, Charmander represents his sex drive, not his sexuality like Brock. At first, it's a cute, easy thing to control, but eventually becomes a raging inferno of disobedience. Since Ash has no real understanding of his sexuality, thus, he has no way to vent or keep it in check. Bulbasaur was his unwillingness to change, reflected in when it declines to evolve and almost decided to stay behind unless he battled it. Squirtle was his willingness to follow the lead of others, as evidenced by the gang it ran with. Even though he ran the gang, they were viewed as one group, and Ash's subconscious gave him the strongest one. Butterfree was his crushing loneliness, which he dealt with when he released it to join a flock. His bird types are his recklessness, always willing to sacrifice something at a moment's notice for the win. When Ash is trading Pokemon, it's an attempt to push his own problems away onto somebody else. However, he realises this and usually trades back very quickly. Not only are Ash's Pokemon a manifestation of different parts of himself, the Pokemon of other trainers are as well. Coughing and Ekans was symbolic of Team Rocket's willingness to change, hence their evolutions. Once his mind was able to overcome that roadblock and allow them to change once, it gave him the chance to truly change. An interesting note is that Pupitar is a rationalization, a Pokemon a rival caught before they met. Even Ash would become suspicious if everyone he met had no carryover Pokemon from the previous places he had been to. Other trainers are more direct forms of his issues, ones he must either come to terms with or outright suppress. Gym leaders are more primary aspects of his personality, with each Pokemon being stronger than the last, to display a level of skill he could only be capable of if he gave in. In effect, he is doing battle with a part of him he would rather not have in control. Originally, Ash had the battles, which evolved into team battles and contests. The explanation for this is that the issue became more and more complicated, and the means of dealing with them needed to become more complex. The fact that he uses issues he has already dominated to win is a sign that he's growing stronger. Ash releases his Pokemon because his mind is forcing him to let go of them. The second he raises an overpowered team, a tournament comes up, and after fighting his way through it, he has to go to a new land for new challenges. However, With an overpowered team, there won't be any challenge or any way to motivate him further. The Ash that wants to stay in the coma and keep journeying hands his solved issues over to Professor Oak so that he can continue and overcome his unresolved ones. This is essentially his mind forcing him to deal with his other issues. Ash's rivals in the Elite Four are ultimately the strongest part of his cycle, having Pokemon that are essentially godlike. They represent both what can be attained and what is unobtainable. Ash's rivals are all possible futures he envisions for himself. Note that they are all older than him. This originated with Gary Oak, someone Ash knew from real life and built up into a sort of god within his mind. However, Gary progressed and changed to suit Ash's vision of himself and his ultimate desire, eventually settling down into a professor role after beating the Elite Four. With Gary Oak in retirement, his mind needed a new rival for him, thus the births of Richie, the good aspect of his rivalry, and Paul. Paul is his mind's last-ditch effort to snap him out of it, to force Ash to actually come to terms with that this is the perfect world is not the best option or path to waking up. Paul is Ash's shadow, one that wants to push on even harder and harder. He is the part of Ash that will stop at nothing to escape the coma world. Mewtwo is a new form of treatment, done with electrical impulses and a machine to snap Ash out of it, taking down every last one of his mental guards, the original Pokemon in the movie. In Ash's mind, Mewtwo and his clones, in the real world, are the treatment for his mental safeguards that were protecting Ash and keeping him comatose, the Pokemon of his world. The clones were counters to the issues that Ash had thought he had solved, and each appeared to Ash as the exact copy of his defences. The clones didn't play by the rules of Ash's world. They didn't use any special attacks or moves. They just began to beat down their counterparts through brute strength. The treatment was working. There were side effects. The electric jolts were beginning to affect Ash's nervous system. If the treatment continued, he would become paralysed. His mind manifested this in the dream world by petrifying him. Were it not for the end of the treatment by Ash's mother, who knew his son wouldn't want to live in a world where he couldn't explore, Ash would have remained as stone forever. After this, Ash needed to recover from the damage caused by the electric therapy. In order to reduce the danger Ash's consciousness felt from it, his subconscious began downplaying the effects in his world, which is why Pikachu's electric attacks, once noted for their strength by Team Rocket, no longer have any effect on Ash, other than comic relief. As we can see, Ash may as well have been trapped in this world forever. However, like every dream, like everything, there is a beginning and an end. What would happen if Ash never recovered? In his hospital room, we see Delia, obviously distraught. She's talking to a doctor with a grim look on his face. The man is saying that their insurance is up, and the boy has had no change in the brain activity in years. The shock of taking him off life support has a very small chance of awakening him. She tearfully agrees. Back in Ash's world, he had finally deleted the Elite Four, and one by one the people around him began to disappear. Eventually, everything is black. Pikachu comes dashing towards him, glowing brighter and brighter in the darkness. Eventually, he reaches Ash and the two embrace one last time. In the hospital room, his life signs are fading. Ash mutters his final words. I want to be the very best. He will die never having known his dream, except as naught but a dream. When he came back to reality, he knew it all for the lie it was, knew it as his imagination, knowing that all his efforts, his ambitions and his friends were nothing. He will let go. As he utters his final words, he barely opens his eyes and sees the silhouette of his mother, her face hidden by her hands wiping away tears. They make eye contact and one last final realization fills him before he loses all his strength. He sees that his mother was holding out hope that he'd recover all that time. He sees her and finds that her hope had been broken and she'd come to the realization that she'd outlived her only child. He dies knowing that he is loved, but that it means the one person closest and most real to him is utterly crushed. Still, there are other possibilities. The fountain of time flows in mysterious ways. One could not go back against the current, such as Gatsby. However, one could never see what is waiting for him downstream. Ash finally defeats Lance, only to be confronted by the not Gary Oak, but a mute mirror image of himself. The voice of the narrator speaks to him, telling him that now he can finally escape the prison of his own mind. One by one his friends appear and melt away into more copies of himself, cheering him on. After a long, tough battle against himself with the assistance of all his Pokemon that he had ever befriended, he jolts awake. In his hospital room he sees his parents asleep. He finds himself unable to talk. Ash pushes forward to his recovery. He goes through with physical therapy, training harder and harder with rehabilitative Pokemon until he can walk on his own again. This time, an older and wiser Ash sets out on a journey. Just like last time, he's getting to Professor Oak's laboratory, where there is only one Pokemon left. He suddenly recalls all his memories of his, quote, life, and realises that all his friends are gone forever. As he sets out with his new companion, he finds the world is darker than he imagined, more real Pokemon, and people die too. He, too, has aged. He vows to become the Pokemon Master he dreamed he was. He vows to himself, and he vows to, quote, "Them, I will be the very best." Right, that was it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed. That was a good little story. Bit weird, the sexuality and things, but catch you guys later. I've been Gilloboijr Jr. There'll be a little playlist on screen, as there always is right now, for the Creepypasta Storytimes. Have a good night or day whenever you watch it. Catch you later. Hey guys, welcome to Creepypasta Storytime. I'm Gilloboijr Jr. and I've just paid for a new microphone today, so hopefully the audio quality is a bit better. I'm looking to improve the series bit by bit wherever I can. Obviously I'm not a millionaire, so I can't completely do it in one day, but let's hope we can get there. Hope you enjoy the story, guys. This is Genocide City by K.I. Simpson. Deleted levels in video games have always been a source of fascination for gamers, and one of the best known examples of them is the 4 deleted zones in Sonic 2. Hidden Palace, Wood, Dust Hill and Genocide City / Cyber City are all listed on a level select screen of a publicly available Sonic 2 beta. Hidden Palace and Wood Zone can be partially played, and there is an old preview picture of what is believed to be Dust Hill. Genocide City, however, is a mystery. Selecting it in the beta will simply load a blank screen where Sonic will instantly fall to his death. The lack of information and excessively threatening name have made this zone one of the biggest mysteries in gaming. Recently, I came across what was claimed to be more than a complete beta of Sonic 2, which had all the missing zones intact and fully playable. I was skeptical that such a thing would exist, and since most deleted levels are cut because they were never finished, but the download description claimed every zone had been completed and removed for an unexplained reason. I started playing the beta. Aside from Tails not being present in the gameplay, the game initially seemed identical to the final version of the game. After completing Emerald Hill and Chemical Plant Zone, however, I ended up in Dust Hill. Dust Hill was pretty similar to the loading screen of it, standard desert theme level. The oddly slow banjo music in the background was a little unsettling, but everything else just felt like normal Sonic 2. The Robotnik boss was his standard vehicle with Robotnik arms holding 6 shooter guns, although they fired standard energy bullets. After Dust Hill, I went through to the Aquatic Ruins, Casino Night and Hilltop Zone, with no differences from the ones in the final game. After Hilltop, I entered the Wood Zone. Like Dust Hill, it fit in perfectly, with the exception of some odd textures on carved wood platforms. They looked almost like faces. The music had a tribal feel to it. Robotnik was fought on a few floating platforms above a spiked pit. He used an axe attachment to his vehicle to eliminate the platforms and attack you. But in Mystic Cave Zone, I noticed the first difference from the final version. I collected the 7 Chaos Emerald in it and didn't get any message about Supersonic, just a "Sonic got them all" message. I couldn't turn into Supersonic either. After completing Oil Ocean, I went to the Hidden Palace Zone. It was pretty much like the version in the well-known beta. Nothing unusual until I got to the end of the second act. Tails was tied to the Master Emerald, Robotnik was hovering above him, doing a laughing animation. Sonic turned into Supersonic and ran past the Master Emerald, grabbing Tails. Right before Robotnik fired a gigantic beam at the Emerald, shattering it, I got a message saying, "Sonic saved Tails," and the screen had faded. Metropolis Zone started. I could change it to Supersonic when I had 50 rings now, and Tails was following me. The rest of the game was just like the normal version. Genocide City Zone never showed up. Confused about Genocide City's absence, I looked around the line trying to find information about the version I had just played. I couldn't find anything, so I decided to try replaying the game without collecting any of the Chaos Emeralds. Everything in the game was identical until I reached the end of the Hidden Palace. Tails was still tied to the Emerald. Robotnik was still above him. Sonic ran to the Emerald to try and save Tails, but Robotnik fired an energy beam diagonally, knocking Sonic back. Robotnik fired his huge beam at the Master Emerald, hitting Tails this time. I heard a loud, high-pitched shriek, which I guess was supposed to be a voice sample from Tails. When the beam went away, Tails and the Master Emerald were both gone without a trace. Robotnik did a laughing animation and flew away. Sonic did an animation I'd never seen before, where he fell to the ground and he just lay there. The words, "You couldn't save him," appeared on the screen, and the level began to fade out. The next zone, as I was expecting, was Genocide City. When it loaded, it was a blank screen, just like the well-known beta. Sonic fell to the bottom and died. I had 13 lives when I had reached this mission, and his falling sequence repeated itself 12 times. When I was down to my final life though, the level was finally loaded. The best way I can describe the graphics is a combination of Chemical Plant and Metropolis Zone, with many objects in the background on fire. The music seems like a remix of the title screen music, but played with nothing but deep bass tones. There didn't seem to be any rings in the zone either, so being down to my last life, I proceeded with caution. There didn't seem to be any enemies in the zone either. In the enemy's place, there were sprites for the animals you free from bandits lying on the ground, not moving. More and more animals appeared as I went deeper into the level. Soon the floors were covered with them. The only challenge in the level was some simple platforming sequences, having to jump over gaps in the floor that led to a burning fire at the bottom of the screen. After going through what felt like a normal Sonic 2 level in length, I reached the goal sign. There was a small gap in the floor before the sign. After touching the sign, instead of running to the right like he usually does, Sonic turns around and just looks into the direction of the gap for about 30 seconds. Then he jumped into it, falling to his death. I got the game over screen. I had forgotten that I had earned a couple of continues earlier in the game. I selected the yes option to continue, but I heard an ear-splitting buzzing noise, like games do when you choose a menu option you aren't allowed to do. I tried a couple more times, but the game clearly wasn't going to let me continue. I finally chose no, and got a game over screen similar to the bad ending in Sonic 1, except instead of juggling emeralds, Robotnik was juggling the bodies of the creatures you free from bandits. I had to reset the game to get away from that screen. I was disturbed by what I had just seen. This certainly explained why Genocide City had been removed from the game, but I couldn't imagine what made Sega even consider to do something like this. Even though I had already played through the game and gotten through the good ending, I felt like I had to do it again. That I couldn't leave the game the way it was for my second playthrough had ended. So for the third time in one day, I started the Sonic 2 beta. The first oddity was the title screen. Tails was gone. Sonic didn't seem to notice, but there was just a bit of empty space in the circle both of them were coming out of. I started the game. It seemed normal until I collected 50 rings and entered the first bonus stage. Instead of rings coming at me, wave after wave of bombs appeared. I dodged them for as long as I could, but finally I got hit. Instead of doing his ring losing animation, the 3D Sonic model did a death animation, and the bonus stage ended. The results screen listed 0 for every stat, but the message at the top was different. In solid black text it said, "You can't bring back the dead." Getting really scared at this point. I collected another 50 rings as quickly as I could, but the bonus stage I entered was identical, ending with the same message. "You can't bring back the dead." I deleted the beta from my computer, and then I downloaded it again, so I could get a good ending. I nearly screamed when I saw the title screen without Tails on it, and as I feared I got the impossible bonus stage again, but this time the message was different when I had lost. "You cannot reverse your mistakes." I was terrified, and was clinging to the irrational belief that I could just get on with the good ending again. Everything would be better. I went on a different computer, downloaded the beta, and got the same title screen. Acting on baseless instinct by this point, I went into the bonus stage again, the message this time, "You have to accept your mistakes." I deleted the beta from the computer as well. I realised the computers were sharing an internet source, that there was a possibility that there was some kind of trick or virus involved. I went to my trusty Genesis, took out the Sonic 2 cartridge I had for over 17 years. If I could just see Tails in it, I knew everything would be okay. But I still haven't got up the courage to risk it. Every rational part of me knows that the beta couldn't possibly affect my cartridge, but I'm just too afraid. Afraid of what will happen if I see a title screen without Tails in it. I dream about it every single night, but I just know that it could get so much worse. Now, this story is split into 2 parts, so this is going to be the beginning of part 2. I was considering making it into 2 videos, but the second part isn't quite long enough. So go make a cup of tea now, take a break, take a gap, pause the video, come back, listen to the second half. Hope you enjoy it. It's been about 2 weeks since I played the Sonic 2 beta. I kept dreaming about it every single night. The dreams were getting worse and worse. I was waking up from them covered in sweat. I couldn't get back to sleep. I was too tired to function during the day. I knew I had to try my Sonic 2 cartridge. It was the only way I could move past this. I was too afraid to try it by myself. However, I invited a friend over, and not wanting him to think I was crazy, I casually suggested we play Sonic 2. I turned on my Genesis, hearing the familiar Sega voice, and then the title screen came up. Tails wasn't in it. I screamed to the top of my lungs. My friend was understandably startled and asked what the hell was wrong with me. Barely holding back tears, I blurted out the whole story in a barely coherent babble. When I was finished, my friend just stared at me for a few seconds and then spoke. "What are you talking about?" Tails was on the title screen, just like he always is. I wasn't able to respond. Somehow this made things seem even worse. Now I wasn't even sure if it really was some kind of curse, or maybe I'd just gone crazy. I sat in complete silence for a few minutes. My friend made up an excuse about having to be somewhere and left. I can't blame him. After the initial shock wore off, I tried actually playing the game. Tails wasn't there, and the bonus round was impossible. I got this message after losing. "You can't run from your failures." I had absolutely no idea what to do at this point. I considered checking myself into a mental institution, but that last message about running from my problems made me afraid to ignore the game. Thinking about the messages, I decided I only had one option. Even if nothing good was likely to come from it, I had to play the game again. I decided to do the next playthrough on my Genesis. Holding a controller in front of a TV, using a system from my childhood, it made me feel safer than playing the beta. Aside from the lack of tails and bonus stages, the first 2 zones were completely normal. I wasn't surprised at this point when the Dust Hill zone came up after the chemical plant, but after going a few screens into it, I saw something new in the background. Tails hanging from a noose on one of those old western style stands you see in hangman games. This image would repeat itself in the background every few screens worth of scrolling. When I got to where I had fought the boss before, there was another image of Tails being hanged in the background. Robotnik wasn't in his special boss vehicle this time, just the generic Sonic 2 floating vehicle he makes his escapes on. He did a laughing animation, and he flew away. There was no victory screen. It just faded out and went to aquatic ruins. The zones that are in the final game were normal, but when I got to the wood zone, there was another change. I had noticed textures in the wood that looked like faces in my first 2 playthroughs, but now they were much clearer. Tails' face in a twisted scream. These were carved everywhere in the level. When I got to the boss, the biggest carving yet was in the background again. Robotnik just did a laughing animation and left, causing the screen to fade out. Mystic Cave and Oil Ocean were normal. Then I had reached Hidden Palace. Hidden Palace had changed a lot more than Dust Hill and Wood Zone. There was no music at all, no enemies either. I walked through 2 empty levels until I'd reached the part where Robotnik had killed Tails. Nothing was there. Not the Master Emerald, Tails, or Robotnik. Sonic had went to the same despair pose as when Tails was killed, and stayed like that for about 30 seconds until the screen had faded out. Genocide City started, and it was too different this time. It was filled with enemies, demon-shaped robots covered in fire. There was no way to kill them, and the level was still lacking rings. There was also lava sprouts shooting up from the bottom of the screen, and fireballs falling from the sky. This was one of the hardest platforming levels I'd ever played, but after several deaths, I made it to the goal sign, which still had the floor gap next to it. I touched the sign, and this time, I did the trick that lets you control Sonic during the end of the level. It worked, and Sonic didn't run into the pit. The victory message was in a familiar black text. It won't bring him back. The screen faded and Genocide City Act 2 appeared. The graphics were different here. The fire had burned out, replaced by ashes and soot-covered ruins in the background. Again, there was no enemies. The corpses of the animals had become bandits, but this time they were all laying in a pile of ash. Also, like my first visit to the zone, the only obstacle was small gaps in the floor. This time they looked like holes that had been burned through it. I reached the end of the zone. Robotnik was in his vehicle, at the right end of the screen, about level with Sonic. He didn't move, so I attacked him. He made the usual flashing damage animation, so I kept doing it. After 8 hits, he still hadn't reacted, or been defeated, but the black text appeared again. What do you hope to accomplish? Not sure what else to do, I kept attacking Robotnik. After a few more hits, killing him won't bring your friend back. I continued to attack Robotnik. The message changed every few hits. You let him die. That will never change. Revenge won't soothe you forever. Like the past, he is lost forever. You can't get your innocence back. Your enemy's blood can't wash away your mistakes. You have no one to blame but yourself. Take responsibilities for your failures. You are attacking the wrong person. After getting all these messages, I got an idea of what the game wanted me to do. Instead of jumping at Robotnik to attack him, I walked into him, causing Sonic to take the damage and die. One final message came up. You have paid the only acceptable price. The game reset, and the title screen came up. This time Sonic wasn't there either. There was just an empty circle. I started the game. On the screen the common beta sent you to when you select Genocide City had appeared. There was no timer, no Sonic falling to his death. Nothing. I turned the system on and off and tried it again. The same thing happened. I tried the beta on my computer. Same thing. Same screen. I tried another Sonic game. It was the same. Everything in the series had erased him. I haven't even tried to play a Sonic game in quite a while now. But I see that one screen every time I close my eyes. Right, that's the end of the story, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. That was actually quite a good read. I quite enjoyed reading that. That was Genocide City, a Sonic Creepypasta. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy. There'll be a playlist on screen right about now with the Creepypasta Storytime YouTube playlist. Just go through it, listen to them. They're all good. I enjoy making them, you know. So, catch you guys later. I'm Gilloboijr Jr. Like and subscribe. Bye-bye. Hey guys, what's going on? I'm Gilloboijr Jr. and welcome to a quick reading of The Glitch from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask Creepypasta. I wanted to replay my old N64 games. I love The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, so there was no question as to what I wanted to play. After a few minutes of plugging in my Nintendo 64 console into the TV, I blew the dust off and popped Majora's Mask into the console. The game started as normal, so I picked a slot and started a new game. The intro started normally too, with Link and Epona in the woods. It continued normally with Skull Kid appearing and stealing Epona from me. Link was dragged around while trying to hold on to the horse, but he was thrown off. He died as soon as he hit the ground. I sat there, surprised. How could that happen? It was playing the death music and showed the game over screen. Curious, I pressed continue and ended up back in the forest where you chased the Skull Kid. The health bar was gone, and my inventory was full of just ocarinas. Every single slot, instead of being empty as it should, was an ocarina. I began to feel uneasy, but kept moving forward until I reached the scene where Link was transformed into a Deku Scrub. The scene ended with Link dying again, which made me want to shut off my console, but I didn't. However, and I continued playing. Nothing of interest happened while I was on the way to Clocktown. Everything was normal, except for my inventory. I reached the scene where Link enters Clocktown and meets the happy mask salesman. When the scene ended, Link died again. I continued on, exploring Clocktown. Oddly, everything that used to be a text box caused Link to die. Clocktown was relatively fine. Nothing was deranged like in the other stories. I just died when something happened. There was no health bar, and way too many ocarinas. But I kept dying. I eventually reached the Great Fairy. I ran towards the fountain and she sprang up out of it. Unfortunately, all she said was 0000000 and scrambled words. I proceeded past the gibberish and got the magic bar, but Link died shortly afterwards. The scene repeated endlessly. I couldn't do anything, so I shut off my N64. As of today, I still have that cartridge on my N64. Both work great. I think what happened was some sort of cartridge glitch that happens when the cartridges get old. This happened only once, and a few years ago at that, so I have no pictures or videos to support my claims. Oh well, I guess. Back to playing Majora's Mask. I know that story was incredibly short, but there's a reason for that. I've actually got a lot to do today, so I've been trying my best to keep these sort of, authentic as possible, recording one a day, but when I've got stuff to do, I didn't think yesterday ahead of time to record. I recorded a long episode yesterday, which was the Pokemon one. I didn't think I had the time to record another one for today, but then stuff come up. So, I'm going to use the end to just kind of, get you one-on-one with me to get you, why the story's short, how I make them, so how to expect them in future. I'm currently trying to make them at one a day. Whether that stays or not is far beyond me. I've got work. I'm currently off work, so I've got quite a lot of spare time on my hands, just not today. But if you have made it this far and watched the entire video, and you do reach this little end part here, there will be a playlist on screen saying to go watch the other Creepypasta Storytimes. Please do. They're really good. I put a lot of effort into them. I spend most of my free time looking at new ones or reading for the ones that I'm going to upload in the day. I make them day by day, so I've got to dedicate however much time the video is. And then the editing, cropping down. I've got to go through so if it's 16 minutes long, you've got to add the 60 minutes I listen to it, but then there's extra to edit the sounds out and whatnot. Obviously it's a lot of work, but that's irrelevant. I do it because I enjoy it and I do it because I want you to see it. But if you are at this point in the video, regardless of the playlist now, let me know what you want to see. If you've got a creepypasta you want me to read, then tell me. If you've got me a topic you want me to see a creepypasta on, or read a creepypasta on, sorry. If you've got a topic, say you really like, I don't know, Captain Falcon, you like F-Zero or Star Fox, you just tell me and I'll read something on it. Other than that, I'm Gilloboijr Jr. Thanks for listening, guys. Thank you so much for all the support. Bye bye.